This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC. We are live. We are live and in color, unlike almost every other station you could turn your dial to, which is going to have some boring, canned commercial or infomercial. We are live, and I am live with my good friend, Wayne Allyn Root. You all know him. How many hours did you say you're on the air, Wayne?
About 20 hours a week.
This guy works harder than Donald Trump. That's a lot. I'm on the air, 2 days a week, and that takes a lot of preparation. Those aren't, including my other media appearances. But Wayne is one of the smartest guys I know, and you're also you're pretty close to Trump.
Not bad. I mean, last night I was sitting at dinner, right? I'm sitting at dinner with my wife, Cindy, and 2 dear friends in Las Vegas at the Red Rock Casino, beautiful restaurant called T-Bones. And I got this inspiration. I said, I'm going to text President Trump because it's baseball spring training is starting, and baseball opening week opening day is just a month away. So I texted President Trump, as I do from time to time, and he's pretty good at listening to me. And I said, listen, Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and the way to get it started is to give him a pardon. And minutes later, President Trump tweets out, I'm giving a pardon to Pete Rose. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
That is fantastic.
And by the way, in my little text to him, I said, and by the way, he's the greatest winner of all time. He won more games than anyone in the history of American sports. And Trump tweeted out, I'm pardoning Pete Rose, and he's all about winning and winning and winning. It's very
and that's a guy. And Trump is a guy who knows a lot about winning, so that's fantastic.
Yes,
well, you also were influential in getting Trump to do several of his tax ideas. Tell us about that.
Yes. Now, you mentioned on the way to the break that Wayne was the guy who created no tax on tips. That one is wrong. You had that one slightly off. But all three kind of go together, so everyone mixes them up sometimes. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security benefits, no tax on overtime. I can't take credit for no tax on tips. I really had nothing to do with that.
That was a waitress, right? That was the waitress.
It was a combination of a waitress and my good friend Jeff Gunter, who ran for U.S. Senate in Nevada and had a TV ad campaign that said no tax on tips. If I win the primary, I'm going to go for no tax on tips. And he sent that TV ad to President Trump. So I think all of it kind of spurred President Trump to come up with the idea of no tax on tips. And then I wrote a column probably 5 years ago and 4 years ago and 3 years ago. Every year I write columns urging no tax on Social Security. And finally, this year I wrote one on July 31st, and I sent it to President Trump. And I said, this is 65 million votes, people over the age of 62. 65 million votes in America. You have got to adopt this as part of your campaign. And about, I think like 4 or 5 days later, he announced no tax on Social Security. So now I thought, what can I do next? I thought no tax on overtime. There's like 50 million blue-collar workers in America who qualify for overtime from time to time. So I wrote that column, and I said the greatest compliment in the world to no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security is no tax on overtime. Right to Trump, I urge you to go for no tax on overtime. Now, this time I sent it right to his desk, just like I did with the first column, and nothing happened for 2 weeks. So I thought, you know what? He probably never noticed it. He's a busy guy. So I texted him. I texted him one morning. I forgot what morning it was, but I think it was like August 31st. And I said, President Trump, you may not have noticed my column on no tax on overtime. It might be even better than no tax on Social Security for you to win this campaign. You should announce it right away. That afternoon, he had a rally in Reno, Nevada, and announced no tax on overtime. So I feel like I had a big part in helping elect President Trump, and now they're close to becoming the law of the land of the United States of America. Pretty amazing.
That's amazing. So I'm talking to Wayne Allyn Root, who is a kind of an informal advisor to Donald Trump, as I am, and as on the TV and radio talk show host. And so, Wayne, during our break, and you're so kind to stay on. I get a lot of texts throughout the show, and one of the texts came in, and I thought this was right up your alley, and it's about Doge. And they're saying that the commenter said, well, look, if Trump saves $1 trillion out of all this wasteful government spending, and Doge, identifies that, then what's going to happen to that money? And this person says, won't that reduce our GDP if we don't spend this money on these programs? Because he said it's almost 3% of our GDP. What do you say to that?
Well, look, I'm a firm believer that when first of all, let me start by saying this. Not all government employees are bad. There are some good ones, obviously.
Sure, of course.
But I think a large percentage of them, I don't know what the percentage is, I don't think anyone does, are kind of, dead weight. A large percentage of them are just incompetent or lazy or don't want to work that hard, and they're just not essential, non-essential, as they say, quote unquote. They're not needed. And I think Javier Milei proved that in Argentina. He turned the worst performing economy in the world, maybe in the history of the world, into a great performing peso and economy overnight by just cutting dramatically spending programs and government employees. Right. He just got rid of like a third of all government employees in the whole country. And I kept writing columns and putting out tweets saying, President Trump, follow Javier Milei. This is exactly what we've got to do. A nation doesn't win with government employee salaries and pensions and gold-plated health care. That money could be better spent and allocated in the private sector. We have homeless vets on the streets, and we have a middle class that's hurting, and I just don't think it's a good idea to spend all your money on government employees, many of whom aren't needed. So, look, I just think what Doge is proving is that for the most part, our money is wasted and stolen, literally looted by either government employees stealing it directly or by giving out contracts that are relatives or friends and getting kickbacks, or maybe even giving out contracts for themselves, but they put it in their wife's name. I think all of this is a disaster for America. And I think once that money is clawed back, let's say it's $1 trillion in the end, clawed back, everybody wants it to reduce the debt. And Steve, I've always been a guy who said the debt is horrible. So it's not like I'm a spendthrift guy. I think the debt is a disaster long term for the United States. But I do want to point out our debt is like, I think, 125% of GDP right now, right around there. Japan's is like 380% of GDP. Yeah. And they're still floating and existing. Japan's still there. So we have a ways to go. It's probably 30 years before it actually crushes our country. So we do have to deal with it. We all agree we have to deal with it. But my personal belief is that some portion of that money, most of it should go to reducing the debt, but some large portion, 20%, 25%, 30%, should go back in the way of tax refunds to the American people. I like
that idea a lot. And the reason I like that idea a lot is it gives people a kind of a dividend. And I think that's the term that
they need a pump.
People need to get buy-in for why we should be cutting this budget. And I like that. I would do 50-50. 50% of the savings go to the American people, 50% go to deficit reduction.
I just wrote last week that I thought it should be 50-50. And just now on your show, I said 20-25 because I got so many people who attacked me for saying 50-50 that I thought maybe I was too high. They all said, no, it's got to all go for the debt. You're making a mistake. So I lowered my aim a little bit, but I think in the end you've emboldened me to go back to 50-50. Let's do that. That's a good idea.
One thing you mentioned earlier about the federal workforce, and I wrote my column this week on this. And look, we have more federal government employees in America today than we have construction workers, manufacturing workers, mining workers, logging. People actually do things. So the federal government and state and local government is so bloated right now. But I would say this, Wayne, and I'd love your reaction to this. Having worked briefly for the federal government a few times, I think it's partly the system itself. I mean, you don't get rewarded for good work. People who are terrible workers don't get fired. And it's an environment. The civil service system is quite corrupt. it just creates an environment of mediocrity, and nobody has a real incentive like in the private sector to excel. You don't get additional pay if you do a great job, and people who do a lousy job, when people don't show up, they get paid. So it's the whole system is corrupt. It's not the people, it's the whole system.
No, I agree. And look, my grandfather came to America with nothing from Germany, and he after 20 years of working as a butcher, he started his own butcher store, and it became wildly successful. I'm an SOB, son of a butcher and grandson of butchers, and it wasn't wildly successful by the standards of Donald Trump, but it was wildly successful by the standards of a small businessman. He had the number one butcher shop in a very upscale town called Bronxville, New York. And my grandfather made money on that butcher store for 50 years mm-hmm. before he died. And he always said, the grandson, there's only two rules to business. Rule number one is the customer is always right. And rule number two, if the customer's wrong, refer back to rule number one. And so when I look at government, that's not the rule of government. Government has it all wrong and all backwards. Look at the IRS. They never say thank you. They never say please. The other day I wrote the IRS a check for $79,000. They don't say please to me. They don't say thank you when they receive it. They couldn't care less. I'm not a customer that they think is always right and wonderful, and they don't send me a birthday card, a Christmas card. They take my $70,000 plus, and they just use it, waste it, and loot it, and nobody ever thanks me. And you know what? If I sound mad, it's because I am mad. Why should I send them $70,000 of my money that I work for, and nobody thanks me and no one says please? And that's the story of government. Nobody cares because it's other people's money. They don't give a damn. They waste it. They spend it. They loot it. They get kickbacks on it. And we don't matter, even though we're the ones that pay for their salaries.
That is so true. Well, Wayne, I appreciate you taking time this afternoon. I'm so proud to be on this task force with you. We are going to be the kitchen cabinet for Donald Trump's tax cut, and it's going to be a fantastic thing. You came up with a lot of the great ideas that we're going to insert into the Trump tax cut. As you know, Larry Kudlow and I wrote one of the first versions of the tax bill back in 2016. And so I think we're going to be a tour de force in terms of getting this tax cut over the goal line. Wayne Allyn Root, thanks so much for joining this week, folks. This is the More Money Show. We'll be right back. And by the way, when we come back, we will take your calls. I want to hear what you think about Zelensky's performance yesterday. I'm angry about it, but I want to hear what you think. 1-800-848-9222 is our call. I want people who will defend Zelensky, people who are angry at Zelensky. I'm not a foreign policy person, so I can learn from you. This is Steve Moore. This is Freedom of Speech Radio on WABC.
Donate now to Toys for Tots, working year-round. Go to toysfortots.org. Toys for Tots supports children in need throughout the year with programs like the Toys for Tots Literacy Program. Established in 2008, has provided over 60 million books to disadvantaged children. The Toys for Tots Literacy Program is committed to providing disadvantaged children with direct access to books and educational resources that enhance their ability to read and communicate effectively. Go to toysfortots.org.